Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. The combine has gone down. Want to talk to somebody who was actually there, boots on the ground in Indianapolis. So I'm going to bring on my guy, friend of the show, Cory Kinnan. Fun time here. You got to spend some time out there in Indianapolis, not just watching these guys go through these drills, but also talking to people. How do you feel after coming back from this trip, man?
Yeah, I need a couple days still. Need a couple days of some good sleep. They're long nights, so 4 days away was a long time, and I stayed up way later than I have since I was in college, and I graduated from college a decade ago. So it's been a while since I was out that late at bars, networking, talking, trying to figure out, or just having an overall good time as well. But like when it's agents buying you beers, like you kind of roll with it. So
Hey,
yeah,
it sounds like some fun. Sounds like some
yeah.
fun for sure. It's always interesting in the combine because you're gonna hear a million different
Mhm,
things about different teams and what they're
mhm.
doing and trying to suss out what's smoke, what's not. It seems like a lot of the smoke coming out the combine has coalesced around Cam Ward out of Miami.
Mhm.
And Cam Ward's one of those prospects where you understand the physical attributes about him that intrigue people, right? You know, the
Yeah.
arm talent. Nobody's going to tell you that Cam Ward doesn't have the best arm in this draft class, right? Like
Right.
that is not something that we're debating. And that's something that can carry you a lot in the pre-draft process. Where Shador, I kind of liking him a little bit to like what happened to Teddy Bridgewater, right? In his
Mhm,
pre-draft, where it's like, oh, he had the stuff that made you go down. The
mhm.
hand size was smaller at the time. We cared a lot about that.
Right.
But like now, it's like as long as you're 9 inches, nobody cares. But it's a lot of smoke. I don't know how to play it because it would make sense that if you're a team and you want to draft the quarterback early and you don't have a strong opinion about one of these guys, Cam Ward's kind of the guy you would default to in the pre-draft process favors. But
Mhm.
there seems to be a lot of ignoring about some of the other things that Cam Ward does that would make you very hesitant about it. How do you rectify somebody like Cam? Because a lot of this is about, hey, we could change his habits, but his habits have been his habits for like 5 years.
5 years. He's a 5-year starter, from
Yeah.
FCS level for 2 years to the Pac-12 for 2 years to Miami for 1 year. And so we've been talking about an FBS quarterback, for like a P4 quarterback, P5, and then P4. If you
Yeah.
Washington State was P5 when he was there. So for 3 years now, and I do think some of those habits are kind of the same kind of stuff. I was talking on a different Browns podcast yesterday, and the host made a good point. It was like, I think teams didn't figure out, like, is this just like the smart kid in class where like he just messes around because he's bored and he knows all the answers already, so he's just kind of playing around. Is this the case with Cam, or is he just this nonchalant? Is it just like, so I think that's part of it, but the 50 career fumbles thing kind of kills me. The situation awareness is really what kind of grinds my gears and has about Cam. Like the Duke
If
game, oh, there's the third
he
and two
throws
spot
that
concept.
interception on a 3rd and 3.
Hmm. Or there's a third and two, they're running spot concept trips to the field or to the boundary. So like just throw the flat, third
Yeah.
and two. But instead, like no pressure. They're not blitzing. It's a four-man front, and he's running around back there trying to hunt a big play. But it's like situational football, man.
Mm-hmm.
Throw the flat on spot concept, get the first down, read it out, and just like move on, move the chains. And so I do think there is some situational football, almost almost like the guy who's been playing quarterback for the Browns for the past 3 years,
Mm-hmm.
a little bit, where it's just like, dude, stay in the pocket, stay in structure, stop running away from your protection, and stop running into sacks. The Georgia Tech game, that big upset loss, the game-ending sack is against a three-man front where he's trying to run away from a three-man front, and it's just like there's just some stuff that like situationally that makes me question like how much does he get it. And again, a lot of the success that we've seen from Cam, and there's no denying the box score, right? But like
Yeah.
a lot of the success we saw are like when he's able to mesh read and rip a play action throw over the top of a second level defender, or where he's able to just rip an RPO. When they start to put more on his plate is when you start to see some hesitancy, is when you start to see some lateness getting the ball out, where you start to see some of that out of structure, running around, waiting for something to come open, then throwing, making a miraculous throw. And I think where I struggle the most is it's kind of some of the same stuff, down to even the similar arm talent and athleticism. Zach Wilson probably a little bit better of an athlete, honestly, than Cam is, but kind of the same stuff we saw from Zach Wilson at BYU, where everybody loved his tape because he was making electric throw after electric throw. But then you slow it down, and you're like, but why is he throwing off platform here when there's no pressure? Why is he out of structure here? And then when he is in structure, why is he late getting to the crosser on mesh? Why is he late finding the dig on dagger? Like, why? It's that kind of stuff. It's like, but why are we late on the easy stuff when we're making this heroic stuff look so easy?
Yeah, and there's like, I guess the best word for it's like an efficiency to your game,
Yeah,
right? Like,
yeah.
we don't mind that you can do that, right?
Mhm.
Obviously, that's a plus, but is there an efficiency to when you go to it? You're not expecting a college player to be perfect at it, right?
Right, but
But
if
there
we're asking
is,
you on 3rd and 5 to get your eyes here and throw the football,
yeah,
are you gonna do it? Like,
yeah.
yeah,
There's some
yeah.
base situations here where you're like, you expect him to be an efficient enough player to be like, okay, let me just get what's in front of me if it's there too.
Mhm.
Sometimes he just looks at it and goes, yeah, I don't want it. Like, and it drives you nuts. And it's like, why is he making that
Mhm.
decision? Is it that you're not like registering it? Or is it that you're more interested in pushing downfield? Like, are we gonna have a Jameis situation with you where it's like, hey man, are you throwing like in the NFL? And then what does that look like? Because he
Mhm.
mentioned at the combine, if I got time there, I'm going to take it. Okay. But what does all of this look like when it gets sped
When
up
everything is sped up,
significantly?
yes,
Right.
yes.
And that's where I think a fall off tends to happen here with a lot of quarterbacks who play like that. Like even Caleb Williams. So I think if there's a guy who could make that work coming out of college, just out of pure talent, like Caleb Williams is as talented as you could get who plays like that. Even he struggled
Yeah.
mightily coming out this year, right? So it is. I think that's the biggest catch 22. He's the kind of prototypical draft dilemma that you
Mhm.
have with the quarterback prospect, where you expect some of this to change. But with Zach, he was 21 and he had only played for like what 3 years,
Mhm.
and you're like, okay, well, maybe some of this is just he doesn't know, right?
Mhm.
With Cam, the lack of efficiency in his game concerns me a lot more because he is a 5-year starter, right?
Mhm.
Because he's had the time to be like, okay, I do need to make strides here. And when you look at Shador, I see somebody who has made the strides to improve some of those flaws a
Mhm.
little bit more seriously than I've seen with Cam, which concerns me about his transition to the NFL. If we try to look at this through a best case scenario lens with Cam Ward, um, what do you see his best case scenario is if he
Mhm.
does learn some of these things that we're very concerned like might be just too ingrained in him to
Yeah,
change as
that's a good
quickly as you need it
question.
to in the NFL?
That's a great question. I'm trying to think of a quarterback who came from that came from. I mean, Josh Allen literally rebuilt everything. Uh, so like, and Josh Allen gets people fired, will get GMs fired. So I don't think that's even worth making the comparison to. Neither is Patrick Mahomes. That's a great question. Because Jaden Daniels, as toolsy as he was, and people wanted to label him as a running quarterback because he ran for 1,000 yards, but that dude would stand in structure, and that dude would take hits throwing backside digs, and that dude would like he would willingly stand in, step up, throw. And again, Jaden Daniels is also the highest, most accurate quarterback that I've charted in the last 4 years. So there's a lot of differences there where people were said like, well, if Cam can do what Jaden did, then but he can't. For one, Jaden runs probably a 4.5. Cam probably runs a 4.8. Like we're talking about different level athletes. We're talking about different level players
Just
here.
yeah, two
Like
different players.
best case scenario, man, that's a great question. That's a great question. Let me pull up a list here. Baker Mayfield.
Yeah,
Baker Mayfield. Tampa Baker Mayfield.
Tampa Baker Mayfield,
I
right?
think that's best
A
case
little bit
scenario.
more disciplined. Yeah,
Straight up raid quarterback in college, right? Came into the NFL and played well because he was playing in spread, like more of a gun spread when he first got to Cleveland under Freddie. Took him a little bit to learn the drop back under center. 2020 was rough at first. He settled in. 2021 could have gone different if some coaching slash, like, well, let's put it on both. Coaching and player stuff could have gone a little bit different in 2021. He's kind of figured it out though in Tampa, completely under center with Liam Cohen, with Dave Canales. So
He stays in the pocket.
I think Tampa Baker Mayfield is the best case scenario for Cam Ward.
That's interesting. That is because I think I had this conversation with JP, right, where we both were like, hey, these guys could probably, both of their ceilings seem to be in that like 11 to 17 range of quarterback, right? That we got a starter. We can make the playoffs with this guy, but real questionable about what you could do afterwards, especially in the AFC where you're going to have to, you at least beat two of these guys who are tier one guys, right? Like your Josh Allens, your Lamar Jacksons, your Joe Burrows, if you count him in there, and then obviously Patrick Mahomes. You're going to have to get through at least two of those guys to get to a championship.
Right. But I think like on the opposite end, like Tampa Jameis Winston is maybe a baseline, or like you could be stepping into a Tampa Cleveland Jameis situation as well. So like I think there are levels to it. You can't just say, of course, if you say like, well, if I'm getting Tampa Baker Mayfield, I'm taking the guy first overall and I'm trading up for him in a heartbeat. But that's the high end. That's like your best. That's what you're hoping you get out of it.
That's the best case scenario. And what I'm saying here is like, if the best case scenario is a dude who played to a level that you predicted he could get to, and you still wanted to trade him to get better at quarterback, what does that say about taking a guy at 2? Like, are you basically begging yourself to repeat the same, not mistake, but to put yourself in the same situation in later time where you're like, okay, well, Cam can get us this far. What else can we really do here at the position? So, I think that's an interesting quorum for the Browns to have here, because they're the ones who said, hey, look, this is not good enough quarterback play to get us where we need to. And then you draft a guy who a lot of people feel like, about that level, right? It's what you can get out of him.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that we aren't privy to, that I wish we had access to. Like, we don't know how he's doing in the locker room or on the whiteboard in team meetings. We don't know what kind of guy he is in the locker room at Miami, at Washington State, how he'll be in Cleveland. There are so many things, like, we don't know how. And again, I don't want to harp on the Baker thing because that's way in the past and good for Baker what he's doing now. But like Baker would not have worked out in Cleveland because he was not coachable in Cleveland. And the things that he's being asked to do now, and he's saying, yes, I will do that, took him to get to Carolina for him to realize like, oh no, I actually do need to do these things.
Not even Carolina. So, like, it took him wearing 17 in LA.
In LA, yeah. So finally he realized like, oh, remember the whole off the leash thing though in Carolina where he's like, oh, I'm finally off the leash. And then he got benched for PJ Walker. I think that was the moment where he asked for his release and said, like, okay, I've got some stuff to figure out. And like, kudos to him for figuring it out.
Yes.
Like, but I don't think he would have figured that out until he departed from Cleveland. So like, we can rehash that all we want. I don't think we need to. But now he's a dad. Now he's found the offseason QB coach that the Browns asked him to find. He should have gotten shoulder surgery like the Browns asked him to get, that he got after the season was over. Like, so there are things that if he would have gotten shoulder surgery, they would have paid him that offseason. They would have paid him that offseason. Like, so, but that's just to say, like, those are things that we don't know. Like, how would Cam Ward behind closed doors react to saying, hey, go get an offseason quarterback coach? Like, if something comes up, like, how open is Cam doing that to where, like, Baker wasn't until he got out of Cleveland? Like, those are the things that we don't have access to.
Yeah. It's also, how strongly do you feel about Cam Ward versus how strongly you feel about the potential of the next quarterback class? I think that has to factor into it, right? Mm-hmm. Because if you feel very strongly about next year's class, kind of like how it happened in reverse last year, right? Mm-hmm. Where people felt good about that class, not great about this class. And they were like, you know what? We'll take Bo Nix early, right? We'll take Michael Penix super early because we don't want to be left in this position next year, which is the down year that people predicted for quarterbacks ended up being true. When you look at the next year's draft class, do you think this is like this is a pretty down year for quarterback, but do you think next year is going to be significantly better, or is it going to be around the same? Because a lot of it hinges on, I think the top end of that class hinges on like, okay, well, what happens with Drew Aller? Like, does he get some wide receivers and looks like a lot better? Cade Klubnik, if he continues to play at that level. There's those guys, the Garrett Nussmeier conversation that some people are infatuated with. And then there's like, well, maybe Lenore Sellers has a Heisman Trophy type year, comes out, or like maybe Arch Manning comes out early, which I don't know if Arch Manning's going to be coming out early. He doesn't like. I don't think the Manning family's really big into coming out early. I don't see why he
No,
would.
and in his games, like Mississippi State was really his only good game that he started. Like even the University of Louisiana Monroe game, like was like this is March Manning against ULM, and it should look a lot better than it does. So like,
Yeah.
well, and I think there's also a reason that like as bad as Ewers was, Texas was hesitant to pull the plug on Ewers. So like we're pretty early in that conversation still. Like we need a substantially larger sample size before we can even have entertain anything with Arch Manning. I think.
Yeah, and the thing with Arch Manning is going to be like, hey, man, if he can walk and chew bubble gum, somebody's going to take him super
Because he's a
high
Manning.
because
Yeah.
he's a Manning, and that brand name is never lost, right?
Yeah.
Like at the quarterback position, especially, it's the one trusted brand name that you can go to if you're an NFL GM. So, yeah, I think they're going to be aware of that. No, hey, man, it don't matter what year this kid come out, right? He's going to
Yeah.
go wherever he wants to go.
Yeah.
So I think they're going to be real selective about it. But like maybe a Lenore Sellers breaks into that conversation. There's other guys who could break into that conversation. Nico Imlava, right? If he has the breakout year, but it hasn't looked like it's going to be what you
Oof.
want it to be out of him in
And he needs to get out of
Tennessee.
Tennessee. That offense is putrid.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Like, so when you look at this, do you think a bet in this class is about the same as the bet next year from where you're sitting right now? And you might as well get it over with this year? Or do you think the bet next year might be good enough to where you don't want to take yourself out of it with the selection in this year's class?
so I would say there's nobody to bet on next year at this point. But that comes with a massive caveat that literally the young guys that are all juniors, and I'm hoping NIL, because I actually think there's a really good conversation to be had that maybe NIL is helping will help quarterback play become good again, because like quarterback play at the college level is putrid right now. It's
Mm-hmm.
awful. And we're seeing it translate to the NFL where like the way that guys win. I think Caleb Williams is a great example of this. Is like Caleb Williams is having to relearn his entire game because he can't run around outside of structure and make any throw he wants to. Because like they're not asking quarterbacks at the college level to do much anymore. So I'm hoping that like there's a conversation that NIL and letting these guys get paid at the college level, letting them stay in college a little bit longer. The Bill Parcells thing, right? Bill Parcells is only one of the guys who played 4 years in college. Um, might improve quarterback play a little bit, but the huge caveat with next year's class is outside of like Nussmeyer, who I'm pretty low on, but um, is that these are all really young guys. They were all first year starters, and they all have really big tools.
Mm-hmm.
Aller was a second year starter. He'll be a senior.
Yeah.
I'm also pretty low on Aller. I know he's a Northeast Ohio kid and he's got the big arm, but there's the peripheral stuff about how his process works and what kind of athlete he is and his body type. Like some of that stuff kind of concerns me. But again, talking about Nico Iamaleava was really bad, like an SEC play. Let's just call it what it is. He was really bad playing in a putrid offense, but first year starter, big time tools. Lenore
Mm-hmm.
Sellers has a ways to go. First year starters, big time tools. Cade Klubnik will be a senior, and Cade Klubnik took a massive stride from 23 to 24. Matt, if he takes another massive stride from 24 to 25, we're talking about the first pick of the draft. Kid runs
Yeah.
a 4.5. Kid's got a hose. Kid is the top recruit in the nation, like former top recruit in the nation. Like, I think that's who I like am most bullish on today would be Klubnik. But again, there was Aiden Childs, Michigan State, Oregon State transfer, massive tools, plays in a drop back offense with Jonathan Smith, who I think is a really good head coach. But Michigan State, like Mel Tucker, burned that program to the ground. So they're literally building ground up. So yeah, he led the nation in interceptions, but he's playing hero ball because he doesn't have talent around him. How does that look in year two when they attack the transfer portal, when they bring in Jonathan Smith's first recruiting class? Like, I think Aiden Childs can look a lot better next year, and that's a name that I would be bullish on. Eli Holstein at Pitt, big time tools, had a huge drop off after a hot start. So that's to say, like, I can't today say that no, like, yes, next year's class will be better. Next year's class has potential to be a lot better, or it has potential to be like none of these guys have developed, and they're all still just like big time tool dummies, I guess, for lack of a better term, of like they just don't know what to do with the football yet, despite having all of these tools. I think you could probably bank on one or two making a leap. Uh, but based off of first year starter tape, the tools are evident, but the process and the rest, the accuracy of the process is not. Um, so no, I don't think I would bank on next year's class just yet, but let's see if one or two break out and develop a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Now, we've talked a lot about the top of this class, right? And those conversations are as expected, but also in a class like this, what tends to happen is that people see an opening at the top, right? And they always try to bring somebody down into that opening, right? The conversation about QB3, it becomes very interesting here. there are, I think you put it as this class of quarterbacks in this class who are, you see what you get, right? Who is the best who is your favorite quarterback, I'll say, prospect out of the, hey, what you see is what you get class of guys?
I mean, if I have to default, I'm probably defaulting to Jackson Dart, but I don't think Jackson Dart's very good. I would still probably take a chance on Jalen Milroe at QB3 over any of the what you see is what you get class. Maybe so. The thing with Will Howard, I would consider Will Howard, but like, was his playoff performance an indication that he took a mental leap in an
Mm-hmm.
NFL offense? Let's call it what it is. Like Chip Kelly's asking his quarterbacks to do drop back NFL things, or did he just like flip a switch and turn the lights out and say, "I'm going to work," and just like go on a Linsanity run. Like, so because like that playoff run, Will Howard has throws that I've never seen him in 5 years make. Both those seam
Mm-hmm.
balls to Ibuka against Tennessee and Oregon, never seen that out of him. He's got a dig throw against Texas into a tight window. It's like, where did that come from? Like, so like, did Will Howard figure something out, or was it just like Ohio State? The entire team, including Will Howard, went into demon mode and they just turned the lights out, shut off their brains, and played football. That I don't know. He wasn't. His throwing session at the combine was putrid.
Do you
Oh.
think it's possible for Will that it might be a little bit of both here, where it's like that first part at the Ohio State season was, new guy, new offense, and then as the season progressed, it got better. But it seems like the switch exclusively hit in the
After the Michigan
playoffs.
game, yeah.
Yeah, after the Michigan game. But like the thing with Will, I'll give him credit for. There were these moments in games where I'm like, okay, the Ohio State offense is going to get started, and like it would start usually with Will making a play that was not unimpressive to start it during the course of the season. Because I remember thinking, oh, this is going to be the game where Ohio State loses to somebody they shouldn't lose to. And then Will Howard comes out there with like a really good drive, and you're like, okay, they're good after like being pretty pedestrian for the rest of the game. So I'm like, maybe this is just like he knew that he had to take it to another level in the playoffs. I don't know what to put on. Also, he is giant and his arm is weak. How
It's
did
the
that
Mason
happen?
Rudolph. I mean, he's a little bit better of an athlete than Mason Rudolph, but it's very Mason Rudolph-ish, where it's like, how does this big 6'5" guy throw the ball with that lack of power? And yeah, so definitely agree with you there. I think a big thing that I noticed was an uptick of throwing the football over the middle of the field.
Mm,
He was anemic to throwing the ball over the middle of the field, wasn't good at it. And that worries me because the middle of the field is the hashes are very condensed at the NFL level. So
yes.
like it gets a lot trickier to try to seed footballs over the middle of the field at the NFL compared to how spread out between the numbers it is at the college level. Um, so that worries me. I think if he's going to try to do that, he's going to throw a lot of interceptions. And that's where we did see he had a bad pick against Texas over the middle of the field. I think early in that Oregon game as well, the start of the second half of that Oregon game as well, he had a bad pick over the middle of the field. So like, that's where I question, like, is he really picking this up, or like, is he just like trusting playmakers down the field at some extent because he has some really good ones? Um, I think he has a trajectory as a backup quarterback, but I would say that for all of that, what you see is what you get. Group. You couldn't get me to buy in on Dart. You couldn't get me to buy in on Howard. You couldn't get me to buy in on Shuck, on Rourke. Any of these guys as NFL starting quarterbacks. And again, I'd still lean towards Milroe as being the third quarterback off the board come April.
Let's talk about Jalen Milroe real
Yeah.
quick. Because like I love everything about Jalen Milroe except for like 80% of his throws, right? Like, and
Except
like
for almost everything, yeah.
because I'm like, I hear him talk. I like he talks about how he understands that it takes a team to get better. I'm like, that's a great mindset that you want. You look at his academic history and you feel really good about it. And he's like, what, got his master's degree in like 3 years at Alabama. He seems very focused. He seems very like smart. And then he has these like he'll make a throw like he did against Auburn, where it's like, oh my God, like he just threw that thing right into a corner to Isaiah Bond, and it's one of the most amazing plays you've seen. And you're like, if he just does that more consistently, he's going to be the number 1 overall pick in whatever draft class he comes out in. But then you watch him, and like, I swear to God, there's times where like he's just supposed to throw to the running back and he misses it by a mile. And I'm like, how does that even happen? And I think the big difference between like him and a Jalen Hurts, right, which one Jalen Hurts is significantly better in college, than Jalen Milroe was, especially their last years. But like Jalen Hurts never really had the issues with the layups that Jalen Milroe has. And I'm like, a dude like him who struggles to be consistent accurately, struggles to be consistent down the field, definitely cannot be somebody who struggles to stay ahead of schedule because he can't hit layups, especially if he takes the sacks that he takes in college, in the NFL, because sometimes I don't feel like he's very aware of what's going on around him, if it's not in front of him.
Yeah, so I think the best place to start this conversation is at the Senior Bowl, where he was putrid. Like putrid at the Senior Bowl. And then you go to his combine throwing session. Again, he's in short, like he's in pants and a t-shirt. But the ball's coming out on time, the ball's coming out accurate. And again, we're talking about the Senior Bowl where it's still a practice environment. It's not like he's like playing a live game and looking putrid. It's still a practice environment. So like, what's the difference here? One, he's training with Jordan Palmer. Definitely worth noticing. But two, I think there's a conversation to be had about like process over results in an all-star game setting, in a combine setting. Like, what if Jordan Palmer and Jalen Milroe went to the Senior Bowl saying, don't worry about how it looks. Don't worry about the result. Go out and focus on your feet only, to the point where it's uncomfortable. Like, what if that's what their plan for the Senior Bowl was? Attack the Senior Bowl, work on your drop back footwork. That's it. Who cares how it looks? What if that was it? And what if that's what he did? Because it did look like some things were pretty intentional in practice tapes with his lower half, and it looked really uncomfortable, and it looked like he was working through some stuff. But what if that was it? And then what if he goes to the combine and his feet look a little cleaner? The ball's coming out on time. He's throwing the ball with a little more accuracy. So it's those kind of things that make me think like maybe Jalen Milroe can have a Jalen Hurts-like career, because everything I know about Jalen Milroe is that he's an extremely hard worker. Everything I know about Jalen Milroe is the tools are there. The dude's got a live arm. Even if the arm talent isn't there, like he's got one throw angle. He's not manipulating windows with his like. Cam Ward has a rubber. He's
not doing that.
Yeah, Cam Ward's got a rubber band. He's got one angle. His arm is very stiff, but the ball comes out. And the thing with Milroe is he runs a 4.38, so like he can create windows with his legs and then throw the football, where other quarterbacks can't do that. So, but what if he has this Josh Allen type psychotic work effort to reshape his game? To me, that's worth the shot. To me, that's worth the shot over taking a shot on what you see is what you get with Jackson Dart. What you see is what you get with Will Howard. What you see is what you get with Tyler Shuck. To me, that's worth the shot to say, like, I'm already seeing some stuff change. I know who he's training with. When you get him into your building, he's only going to train. The wild card being Tommy Rees also knows who he is and knows how he trains and knows who he is as a person. So the Browns kind of have a head up there as well, and making that decision. So if you're not sold at one of these guys, and I'll tell you what, if the Browns were sold on Cam Ward, they'd be the ones being aggressive to go up to one right now. That's all I'm saying. Like if the Browns truly love Cam Ward as much as they do, then they would be working the phones right now with the Titans to say, let's go up the spot. Let us come up. Because you don't leak that you love a player. You don't leak that you love a player if you don't have the direct right to draft that player. And the Browns do not have the direct right to draft that player right now. And so that makes me think maybe they are going to punt and take the shot on Milroe at 33 they pick up another second round pick, something like that. Like maybe they do. Maybe they're the team that does it. I could definitely see it. But that makes me a little like, and that's to say that I know how bad Jalen Milroe was this year. My charting data shows me how inaccurate Jalen Milroe was this year. I know how those things tend to translate, but I know his work ethic. Is he a psycho like Josh Allen was to rebuild his entire game from the ground up?
Do you have any worries? Because like this is my big worry with Milroe is there seemed to be something about him that made it easy for him to lose confidence in the action of games, which like it's great that he worked. Like I truly believe he is like going to be the guy who passes like all the off the field tests for any coach. Like coach is going to love this dude. Yeah. And in the same way that like the coaches love DTR, and DTR shows progress when you watch him in the preseason and in practice, and then them bullets start flying. And like DTR's fine usually when he first come in, and then he throw that first interception or like get that first ball batted, and then you see it all kind of start to unravel with him because it's just something there to where like if something goes wrong, he gets in this very uncomfortable place mentally where he can't just say, all right, that was a mistake. Let's get back out there, keep working. And I feel like sometimes that happens with Milroe where you watch him in that Tennessee game especially, and like one thing goes wrong and then it all kind of starts to crash down. There were times, to be fair to him, like in that Michigan playoff game, I mean, not playoff game, bowl game, where it went all wrong in the first half, and then he started to correct it. So it's not to say this is like exclusively happening to him, but I do worry about like, okay, he can put the work in and he can practice and get this to a point to where it looks a lot better, but is he one of those guys you're always going to be concerned about once the bullets start flying? He's going to revert to bad habits or kind of have a hard time translating what he knows in his frontal lobe to like the unconscious part of him.
Yeah. I want to go back to this 2023 schedule real fast and just see something. I mean, I'm curious the difference in coaching styles between Nick Saban and Kalen DeBoer. And the different personnel around him, different offensive coordinator, different quarterback coach. And is he a chameleon who takes on the people around him? Because, I mean, going back to his 2023 stuff, like Alabama's beating Georgia, Alabama's beating everybody. All of the ranked opponents that they're facing. They're blowing out LSU and Jaden Daniels, and he gets sixth place Heisman votes. And
he got beef with LSU, dog.
Yeah, he does. He does. And one thing we know about Tommy Rees from our limited time in Cleveland of that is that he is kind of and what we've seen, if you remember when he was the offensive coordinator at Notre Dame, screaming at his quarterback on the sideline, like over the phone from the booth all the way down to the field. I think it was Drew Pine was the quarterback at the time, screaming at like I think that Tommy Rees expects a high level out of the people around him. And so like, and that's definitely the case with Saban. Saban will drive that out of you. And Saban has nothing but praise for Jalen Milroe, the worker that he is, the athlete. Nick Saban has said that Jalen Milroe is the best athlete he's ever coached. So on that 2023 team, at least. So like, is he a chameleon that kind of takes on the coaches around him as well? Because like, Bama didn't show a whole lot of resilience this year. Is that a staffing thing? Is that a like, so if he comes into Cleveland and they say, Jalen, this is what we expect of you, and he knows who Tommy is, like, is that something that, again, is he going to be a chameleon to that situation as well? So that's kind of where my inclination goes is like, maybe he lives up to the standard of what those around him expect of him. Like, is that something that's there?
It might be something to think about too, because like Kevin's a real, like, it ain't gonna really change how he is. It's interesting that he kind of chooses these more emotionally up and down people to surround himself with.
And I think that's intentional.
Because he's like, okay, I can stabilize it, right?
Yeah.
Like I can kind of keep it down to a certain level.
I'll let Tommy yell at him.
Yeah. Like, then like, let somebody else be your anger translator. Because like when Kevin's done with you is not when he's yelling at you. That's usually he cares. It's when he just gets that exasperated look on his face where he's like, well, like I think what Deshaun did that to him week 5, where I was like, oh yeah, he's done, dog. Like, there's nothing else he feels like he can do with you. But yeah, now I have an interesting thought about Jalen Milroe's potential, because I think we see the athletic ability, the arm, and we're like, on paper the potential is insane for him. I do worry if sometimes we're like, he has technically that ability, but he's never demonstrated the consistency to ever get you really excited that anything in that upside is actually tangible for him. Like, what if his upside is more like where Tyrod Taylor sat in Buffalo, right? Where he's like, this guy who could start, maybe make a Pro Bowl in a down year for the AFC. And also, with the amount of work that goes into Jalen Milroe, are you sure you want to be the team that drafts Jalen Milroe, or do you want to be the team that picks him up second? Because I think, there might be a similar vibe there with him and like a Tyrod, where it's like, I might not want to be the team that sinks 4 years into developing this dude and then like he walks in free agency, but you might want to be the team that maybe trades for him in his 3rd year, right? Or something like that, where he might not be for right now, but maybe for the future if that situation comes up with him.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. I think where the Browns are, it doesn't hurt to take the shot. It doesn't hurt to take the shot. I mean, if they don't win, 8 games next year, regardless, they're all losing their jobs. So like, whether you win those games with Kirk Cousins while you develop Jalen Milroe, or you win those games with Cam Ward, I don't think it matters how you get it done. Yeah, I don't know about that. I think I would still take the shot. If you're not sold on a quarterback in the first round, I think that's still the shot I would take.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to try to solve the problem, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
long term, instead of like, hey, maybe this guy can be a stopgap if like he's a little bit higher than what people projected on him. I think Jalen Milroe is probably your third best bet here. I don't think people. I'm surprised. Can you explain the Jackson Dart thing? Like,
Analytics, fantasy football. He's got a
okay,
really high EPA per play because
uh,
he throws a lot of 9 balls. But that's if you turn the computer off and watch some Jackson Dart tape,
yeah,
especially in high leverage situations,
yes.
you'll find out what kind of quarterback Jackson
Because
that I think the Jackson Dart quarter that I think he is.
I've been trying to because I've seen him in person, right? I've watched some of the tape, and I'm like,
I think it would be different if he had big tools, but he has average tools. He's an average
mhm,
athlete with an average arm. So like I even think Shador Sanders has a better arm.
yeah.
Like
It's
I
one of those. It's one of those things where it's like Ole Miss tends to make a lot of those too,
they
right?
spread
Like,
everything out so wide. So you have 5 guys on islands.
mhm.
Is how they spread everything out. So like you should be able to find something, but the rate at which he finds them tends to be slow. And again, in high leverage situations, Kentucky, Florida, tons of these games where they're down 1 score, LSU, and he's begging to turn the football over. Like he's begging to turn the football over. So take him if you want, man. I guess like at this point, that's kind of where I'm at with it.
All right, I'm going to present two situations to you. By the way,
Okay.
congratulations, Cory. You've just become general manager of the Cleveland Browns, and you
Love
are
it.
in charge of the number 2 overall
Oh,
pick.
Jesus.
Uh-huh. Now, the first scenario I have to you is this. Abdul Carter goes number 1, and your
Mhm.
phone is not ringing at 2. Nobody's trying to hit you up, trying to make that trade back. So you got to make a pick here at 2. What do you do,
I mean,
GM Cory?
I am in the minority on this, but I'm a Shador Sanders QB1 truther. Like
Okay.
his accuracy profile is the second highest in the past 4 years to only Jane Daniels that I've charted. I think from a wits perspective, he's running a pro style ish offense. It's really spread out and pretty uningenuitive from Pat Shermer, but he is running a lot of like a lot of pure drop back stuff at Colorado as well. And for the most part, he's throwing with anticipation. He's trying to get the ball out on time. He's trying to stand in the pocket. He's trying to step up. There are some drifting tendencies. So like, but I see the projection into an NFL offense without having to reteach a ton of stuff. I see it from an IQ perspective of this guy, this kid can pick it up. And I will take A wits and B tools over B wits and A tools. That's just how I choose to look at quarterbacks. And so like I'm gonna be in the minority, but I'm gonna say I would take Shador Sanders second overall.
It's interesting too, right? Because like the talk before the draft was like how everybody was going to try to avoid Cleveland that was a quarterback. And then like the
Mhm.
process comes around and it's like everybody kind of was like,
Everybody's sucking up to Cleveland.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, oh man, I definitely would rather go there than New York, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting that like I think some of these prospects kind of understand, like, hey, like I think Cam Ward was like, nah, I definitely would rather go to Cleveland. Like they have Jerry Judy, the
Mhm.
defense there, and then I think Shador. I mean, he's doing his thing where he flirts with every team, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, he's acted like, oh yeah, well, Cleveland, I like that situation they're set up. That's why I play with them on Madden, all that stuff.
Mhm.
It is interesting to see how that whole storyline has just completely dissipated by the time that we've gotten to the combine. Now you seem, if you can't get, if are you number 2 quarterback no matter what kind of guy, or is it like, hey, are there prospects that could move you off quarterback, and like how do you feel about Travis Hunter if he's there to taking him?
Yeah, I don't think I would be too opposed either way. I understand the need for a quarterback. I guess
Mm-hmm.
what it comes down to is like, does the team, if the team believes in the quarterback, you take the quarterback. If the team doesn't believe in the quarterback, you don't force the quarterback just because you have the ability to take the quarterback.
Yeah.
Like that's just bad process. So if you don't think that Cam or Shador are it, then like don't take one just to take one. Like
I tend to think of it
I,
similarly, where it's like, hey, if your front office is saying we need to take a quarterback, so they take a quarterback at 2, that's probably going to end up like Mitchell Trubisky did, right? Where it's just not like usually when you reach for a quarterback, like, and that's the mindset, that's going to be the result. But if you're saying to yourself internally, we want to draft Cam Ward, right?
Then take him. Then take the
or
quarterback.
we want to take Shedeur Sanders. And it's not specifically about the position, it's about the prospect. Okay, I got no problem with that. Even if it's a reach, I'm like, that has a better chance of working than if you're just like, nah, we need to take a shot, right? We need to get a scratch-off ticket on quarterback, and let's use the earliest one we got to scratch that one off and see if we can get a quarterback. Then I have issues with that. So, yeah. But are there prospects that could take you off quarterback?
I mean, I would take Travis Hunter if I could. Of course I would take Travis Hunter. I would take Abdul Carter. Ideally, I think the best case scenario is to trade back. But again, if New York's coming up to 1 like everybody says they are, then like nobody's calling it 2.
What's the furthest you trade back?
I think 6 would be a sweet spot, like Vegas, 6 or 7, Vegas, New York Jets. One of those.
What's the worst spot you're willing to trade back to?
Probably the Jets. Let me pull up the draft order real fast.
That's what, 7?
7, yeah. Because I don't want to miss out on a first round talent, and in this class there's like 10 of them. There's like
who's
10
your packet if you
grades.
trade back to 6 or 7? Like your packet of players, you're like, I want to get one of these guys.
So I mean, I'm assuming Abdul's off the board. So Mason Graham, Travis Hunter's probably off the board. So Mason Graham or Shamar Stewart are probably the two that I would be most intently focused on. Yeah.
Yeah, Graham at 7. That's awesome.
Yeah. Shamar, I'm not afraid of Shamar Stewart's production. I know people are freaked out that he only had 4.5 career sacks. Blah blah blah. Look at the kid. He's 267 at the combine. He plays at 280, and he plays with bend and explosiveness and heavy hands. It's like, I'm not afraid of drafting that kid early, the way that some other people are.
Glad you brought him up, right? Because there's been a lot of conversation about surf techniques. I don't think a lot of people know what that is. Could you explain like what that is and why that's a reason why people aren't too concerned about Shamar Stewart's production?
Yeah, so especially in the SEC, Alabama, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, all of these schools are running predominant gun, and a big focus of their run game is read option. So surf technique is where the defensive end isn't crashing, the defensive end isn't gap shooting, the defensive end isn't penetrating, but instead he's surfing off of the outside hip of the offensive tackle, because if it's read option, then he is the read player. So he's putting himself in position not to cave on the running back, because if he caves on the running back, quarterback's pulling, and he's putting himself in position not to crash on the quarterback, because if he crashes on the quarterback's handing. So surf technique is a way to put yourself in the best position to be able to make a play on either mesh point decision that is made on a read option. But to do that, you play slower out of your stance, and you don't get to pin your ears back.
And when you say surf, what does that specifically mean?
Yeah, so you're attaching yourself to the outside hip and kind of flowing with the outside hip of that tackle, because that tackle's climbing in read option. You're not getting touched by that tackle because they're reading you. They're leaving you unblocked. They want you to make a decision to crash on the running back or crash on the quarterback.
So essentially, it's an
adjustment. You're surfing down the line of scrimmage.
Yeah. It's an adjustment from the defensive line to react, because the read option is reading off of the reaction, right? So it's to slow down their process by slowing down your process, being able to react with what decision they make, and kind of forcing them into a decision so that you can react and can kind of get back the advantage on defense, right?
But guess what? His defensive lines to do.
He is not doing that.
He's telling them to get off the ball and get into the man across from you. So, like, guess what? This kid.
That's a real off the leash.
1.59,
right?
10-yard split at 280 pounds at 6'5" with a 34-inch wingspan. So, yeah, I'll take that.
It's he in that caliber where he's talented enough to where you just feel like you should be able to coach that into something.
Yeah, I mean, Trayvon Walker, first overall in 2022 with no production, and he's got back-to-back 10 sack seasons with the Jaguars. So, like, you hope you teach it to an elite athlete in an alien frame. Like, that's what you want. And you have Jim Schwartz. So, like, if you're saying Jim Schwartz can't get that out of him, then, like, what are we doing here?
All right. 33, best offensive tackle you think the Browns could get at 33?
I tend to think it's probably Oregon's Josh Connerly. I'm not convinced Josh Connerly won't go first round. But if Oregon's Josh Connerly is on the board at 33, yeah. Donovan Jackson I view as a tackle, man. I know he played predominant guard at Ohio State, but his stretch of tackle play once Josh Simmons went down at Ohio State, especially in the playoffs, is like, this is a top 20 player in the class at tackle. He's got the length, he's got the foot speed. I think Donovan Jackson would be a heck of a pick at tackle at 33 as well. But also, if that fails and he doesn't play well at tackle, Joel Bitonio has either 0 or 1 year left in his career. So, like, if then kick into left guard, where he's played his entire college career.
All right. So. Who would you be willing to trade back into the late first round for in this draft class?
Mhm.
And who, if you traded back from 33 to probably around 40, would you select?
Ooh. So again, I think that the NFL is at such a premium on offensive tackles that I think you consider coming up from 33 for one. Because again, Josh Connerly is a former 5-star. He is an elite athlete. Like, what are the odds that he's going to sit there on the board? So, like, again, I'm looking at a team like Minnesota who has like 3 picks in this draft.
Yeah.
And their GM is a very good friend of our GM's. So, like, could you come up to 24 for an offensive tackle from 33? I think Shedeur Sanders, if he slips the way that we're saying Shedeur Sanders is slipping down draft boards, come up in the background of the first round and draft that guy then. Like, without a doubt in my mind, I'm doing that. But I think probably offensive tackle or a slipping Shedeur would be the only only two scenarios where I would say come up from 33 and make sure you get one of those guys.
Mm-hmm. Now, the more likely scenarios, they move back from 33, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Where who has to be there at 33 for you to be like, absolutely not gonna move off this pick, that you don't think somebody would trade up to 32 to get ahead of you on, and who would you feel like you have a good chance to get at 40 that'd be worth getting the extra picks for trading back from 33?
Yeah, so some players that we're hearing might slip in like mock drafts and stuff. That's absolutely insane to me. That you absolutely sit at 33 and you take Malachi Starks, Georgia, safety out of Georgia. No reason that kid should go out of the first round. No reason that kid should make it out of the top 20. If he's on the board at 33, take him.
Yes.
Wide receiver Luther Burden, another guy. Like, why are we talking about this guy falling out of the first round right now? You need a slot Z to pair with Jerry Jeudy to give yourself some alignment versatility with both those players. Manufacture some touches for Luther Burden. Elite explosiveness, elite lower half strength. Like, he'll break tackles, and I think he's better than what the role he was designed like to do it at Missouri. So like, Luther Burden, take him at 33. Shamar is obviously one of those offensive tackles, or Shedeur Sanders. If you're trending back to 40, I think that's where we start talking about maybe a running back, Caleb Johnson, Travion Henderson. I think Omarion Hampton would be gone, and I think Omarion Hampton's more of like a gap power guy anyway. So I'm not sure if that's a guy that you take there at 40. But Henderson, Johnson, are kind of guys that I would be looking at there. Looking at safeties. I mean, they're probably going to draft a corner too.
Worry you about Caleb Johnson at all?
No, because he's a 4.5 guy. He's a mid 4.5 guy on tape. So like, he's smooth. He's physical. He's a really good athlete laterally. So like, all the things I know about Caleb Johnson, I saw at the combine. So
what do you do with the combine that Quid had? Because did not expect him at 20 pounds heavier to basically put up similar numbers.
He's way more explosive than he is on tape. I definitely like that Notre Dame game. I was like,
was he hurt?
Is he hurt when he got pulled down from behind on that 70-yard run? Because like, he doesn't have a second gear, and I know he tested like that, but again, his 10-yard split was good. So yeah, that initial burst is there, but like, he still doesn't have a second gear on tape. He gets a little boost because he is a little more explosive than I thought he was. But like, at the end of the day, a lot of the stuff with Quinshawn is still his eyes and his lack of patience. Like, Quinshawn is the kind of guy that will run anybody over for 4 yards, even if that guy's wearing the same uniform as him. So like, yeah, there you go. But like, I don't draft that guy before like late round 3, early round 4, you know? So like, that's kind of where I stand on Quinshawn Judkins. Because he is pretty stiff, not a lot of change of direction, offers a little bit out of the backfield. He'll hit. So like, I think every running back room needs a Quinshawn Judkins, but I'm not putting a premium on drafting.
Yeah, Quinshawn is the shotgun, right? Like,
he's the shotgun. Yeah.
You have the sniper, you have the assault, right? But he is the shotgun. He is the move it out the way. Boom. All right, we're gonna get 4 yards.
He is the 3rd and 1. He will roll over Wyatt Teller's ankle to get you that 1 yard. Yeah, he's that kind of guy. Yeah.
He is the guy that you put in a drill in camp to get shit going, right?
Yeah.
Like, he gonna get it cracking. Let's put Quinn in a drill where he got to hit something. Let's get the energy up, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of the role that he will play there. Fun.
Have you seen that tweet that was like, Ohio State has the perfect backfield? You need one guy who's a youth passer and one guy who'll run through anybody's face. It's like,
that's Trey Quinn.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Ooh, with a big ass Will Howard in there, being able to like throw his body in there for like a yard or two if you need it. So yeah, Ohio State just had a hell of a team this year. But
they paid for it.
hey, good money. Look, we don't say nothing. We say a GM do his job good when he assembles a team like that in a pro level. I feel like it should be the same thing because you can spend all that money and be ass, right? Like that's happened before NIL, where you can spend a lot of money and it not work out, So that was some good free agent signings that the Ohio State Buckeyes made, And look, quarterback was tough in the portal. I give them all the credit. Now, I wasn't guessing they go after Will Howard. I was like, maybe they go Riley Leonard or something like that. That was a much better choice.
Well, they did want Cam Ward, but they came up I think it was like $500,000 shorter than Miami did, and
Miami was not going to be outspent. They were always going to show up.
Private school, big boosters. Yeah, you're not outspending Miami.
It's Miami. That's a college kid. By the way, Carson Beck, all-time worst fit for Miami. Not even talking about anything on the field. That kid does not need to be in Miami.
He might die. We're going to find him deceased on the hood of a yacht by August.
They were like, well, it worked out for Cam Ward. I'm like, I don't know if that's going to be how that works out for Carson. Like, this feel like, remember that one kid from Bishop Gorman? He was like the next
Martell?
Johnny Manziel. Yeah, Tate Martell. He went to Miami. Everybody knew that was going to be like, oh, yeah, that's not a good place for him to go.
And then he went to UNLV. Then he went to Vegas. He went from Miami to Vegas. Like, oh, that's so much better. Yeah. Good job.
No, he spent that 1 year in Columbus. He was like, nah, I need to party. But it is an interesting draft class, and the Browns do have some of the more interesting picks here. You think this is another thing I have, and this is the last thing we'll touch on. I have a concern that the trade market's just not going to be what we want it to be at too. Because for me, I just don't believe in this quarterback class in the level that I would like to believe it in. And for me, it makes it hard for me to believe that there's going to be a ton of energy to move up. It definitely when it feels like everybody trying to move back, right? It feels like one of them drafts where nobody wants the top 2 or 3 pick. Everybody sees the value in moving back. What do you think? Do you think there will be a market there, or do you think there's a chance that so many teams in the top 5 want to trade back that the market gets super diluted for the 1 or 2 teams that are interested in trading up, that it doesn't end up being worthwhile from a value perspective because there's so many other people willing to sell their pick?
Yeah. I tend to think that the market's not going to be there either. So Carolina traded up to number 1 on March 10th, the week after the combine. I think we'll have a good indication of what the market will be by next week. If we're still hearing the Titans are trying, the Titans might have to 2022 Jaguars that just take the player they want, man. And then the Browns might take the quarterback. But if the Titans ain't trading out, the Browns aren't trading out. If the Titans do trade up and Cam Ward really is the only quarterback in this class as people see it, then Vegas at 6 and New York at 7 are gonna be no, we'll wait it out.
Yeah, and it's never really a great sign when a team that does not have a quarterback has the number 1 overall pick and they try to trade it, right? That's usually the marker there where it's hey, there might not be a ton of energy here to move up. Because
so do I think a trade's going to happen? Yes, to 1, because I think that Joe Shane is that desperate, and the Giants and Daboll, I think they're that desperate. I do think that's going to happen.
They are desperate.
And I think that noise is coming from Nashville saying, hey, the Browns love Cam Ward. Browns love Cam Ward. I think that's all coming from Nashville. And so, because again, the Browns wouldn't be putting out that much love for a player they don't have the right to draft. That just makes no sense. Unless the Browns are also trying to get the Giants to come up, because
they want Abdul or something.
Abdul. That's what where my mind goes is the Browns want Abdul. Kind of where my mind's going, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's just so hard to tell this early on in the process. And we're going to see these boards flip from every which way. Last question. Where would you have these quarterbacks ranked in your overall big board?
Yeah. This year or last year?
This year.
This
so
year,
if you're just are any of these quarterbacks in the top 10 of your big board?
No. None of them are in the top 25.
Wow.
On my big board.
Ooh,
Shador Sanders is 27 on my board, and he's my QB1.
Who is the highest on your big board in since you've been doing this? The quarterback that's been the highest on your big board, the highest as in the number, that got drafted the earliest, that has worked out the best for that team.
I'm holding out hope for one because he's got a new head coach. But I mean, the easy answer is like Trevor Lawrence was the undeniable best player in his class, and he went number one overall. Like,
What I'm
but
saying
that hasn't panned out yet.
the opposite way. So
Oh, I see what
somebody,
you're saying.
yeah, who was down
Mm.
on your board, my bad, I used the wrong word
Yeah,
there,
yeah, yeah. Okay, okay.
down on your board, that got drafted early.
Mm-hmm.
What's the best you've seen of that working out for a team?
Jalen Hurts by a mile. I mean, going in the second round and seeing a massive second contract and winning a Super Bowl, I think that would be
How low are you on
Jalen Hurts.
Jalen Hurts?
I mean, I had a second or third round grade on Jalen Hurts, like the rest of the league did. He went second round, right? So like,
Mm-hmm.
but I think early it's too early to tell for last year's class, but I would say Bo Nix is exceeding expectations of where I had him seated. Versus what he did. I also think that Bo Nix were a little early because he does have Sean Payton who's doing some good stuff for him. But I also think that Bo Nix came into the league as a high floor player, so I'm not super shocked that he hit a high floor early. But I'm more like, is there anything above what we saw? Like, is it kind of Mac Jones-ish, where like everybody's like, Mac Jones was awesome as a rookie, and now Mac Jones is a free agent and a backup quarterback who got traded for a late day 3 pick, and like, and Bo Nix has way more tools than he's way more athletic and has a better arm than Mac Jones. So like, I give him more slack, but I do think that like in the same regard as Jones, that we're already pushing that floor to ceiling
Mm-hmm.
spacing for Bo Nix.
Because I'm trying to find situations where teams have reached pretty significantly on their draft selection at quarterback, and it's actually worked out. Like, I think there's not really I mean, for obvious reasons, there's not a rich history of that, because usually when you're reaching, it's out of desperation, and that's not a good situation for a quarterback to go into. But I'm like, when had like maybe depending on how people are all over the place on Kyler Murray. He went number one overall. Maybe that's like a similar kind of like thing.
It's a little bit the year before my time too, so just a little bit before my time. I mean, Anthony Richardson is the ideal right there. Like he was picked fourth overall after 10 career starts and not very much success at the college level, with the hope that like he's an alien. So let's develop that.
Once in a generation alien.
Yeah, yeah. They will. I don't think they'll make another one like Anthony Richardson. But
if Anthony Richardson were in this draft class, I'd be like, yeah, you got to take him too. Like you got to take him in too. Like,
listen, man. I would say if the Colts want to sell him, I'd pick up the phone.
Yeah, like because like people kind of get on me because I've been like, I just don't want to do it this year. Like unless somebody in the organization insist for the reasons you would want them to insist on. I'm like,
but I don't think they're going to, because they just did that and now they're paying for it. Where somebody in the organization insisted that you have to make this move. Mm-hmm. So like everything I've heard is that like Jimmy's saying, my bad, let's give some grace. I'm not gonna. So why would they do it again? It makes no sense. They're just gonna be like, no, but you have to go pick a quarterback at 2 now. Like, so best case scenario is that like, yeah, nobody's overstepping. And if Shador does slide, then like, yeah, go trade up and pull the trigger. But like, I think that's best case scenario. Don't take a quarterback you don't like. You just can't do
it. Yeah, it's just not. You're not setting anybody up for a good situation there, right? If you don't love, if you love them, cool, whatever. Treat it like how you want to treat it. Commit to it. Have a real vision for that player. But I mean, like, I think that's the thing. Anybody you take it to, you got to have vision for. Right? Like, you can't be guessing what the plan is. That's how you do shit like any position. Justin Gilbert, key example. Took that man without a plan, right? Because he was the number one corner on your board, and that did not work out, right? You didn't do the due diligence on him. Just whatever you do it to, you got to have a plan here, right? Like, it's not a vibes type of pick here.
Right.
And like, that's what I hope they avoid. And that's literally what Andrew Berry is here for, right? To avoid making the emotional decision. That's why we have analytics and people who are process-based in this spot versus people who are more vibes-based, more the football guy kind of people, right? Like the Greg Williams of the world, who said he would definitely have took Mitchell Trubisky, number one overall that year. It's a fascinating draft to think about what the Browns are going to do at 2. We'll see if they stay at 2 or if they trade back, move up. A lot to think about. Cory, any parting thoughts before we head out here?
I think that was pretty all encompassing there. I think, yeah.
Think we got it all?
I think we got it all.
Awesome. All right. Well, you guys make sure you go and check out Cory. I think there's been new places where your work is dropping now since we last talked. So let the people know where to find you, man.
Fake Cory Kinnan on Twitter obviously is the main spot you can find me. But I do run my own draft Substack, draft site, Daft on Draft, and I've seen some pretty big booming in terms of numbers, and that's growing pretty well. So I'm pretty happy with that. And then I did start charting quarterbacks and writing quarterback analysis piece at the NFL level for reception perception as well. So I'm doing some work for reception perception too.
All right. Make sure you guys check that out. Make sure y'all check out that like it is an amazing resource to have there, the charting project that you did there, because you have the Google Docs and everything available. Like it's an amazing resource. I urge everybody to take a look at that, because it's not often you get stuff like that for free. Like there's a lot of hard work being put out there by Cory. Appreciate you coming on. Appreciate your work, man. Everybody else, y'all have a great day. Have even better night. Peace.